Well, down to Pastor Pete speaking to you from the church grounds here, where we are particularly grateful that we still have the opportunity to at least conduct the business of our ministry, even though we're not able to gather at this time. I know so many of you, like me, long for the opportunity that God would give us again to be able to meet together in this place. That's how we've been designed. That's what God has designed us for. And one of the ways, frankly, that we can see that come to pass is that we would observe the safety protocols and frankly observe them perhaps in a way that's a little bit more diligent than we have over these last number of months. That's no accusation against our church in particular. It's just echoing the health authorities' plea that the numbers have continued to climb, and overwhelmingly it's because of social gatherings and because of safety protocols not being kept onto and kept with, just continued with on the scale that they should be. And so I want to encourage you also to consider strongly getting your vaccine. There's every reason to expect that it is safe. Literally tens of thousands of people have received it. I've received mine. My wife and professionals are giving that it's safe, and it is going to help our community not only be safe but be safer in the coming months. And so please keep that in mind. Consider the kind of humility that's required in all aspects of our Christian life, that being in particular excuse me, that we would consider others better than ourselves, and we would consider that others know better than ourselves. Don't let the occasional sensationalistic journal story that tells you because we found one case somewhere, all of us are at risk. You know, there's the reality of our ministry here at the church is that we are shut down. We are online only, as you know. And so this video that will be posted up on Saturday will come with it the link to our Sunday morning online ministry, which I am very much looking forward to sharing with you. We will continue our study in the book of Philippians in the 2nd chapter, verses 19 to 30, where we will see a couple of key examples and examples that we are shown, I believe, to emulate in Timothy and Epaphroditus, and to see the kind of application that we might make to the future help and encouragement here of our ministry at Downsview. Again, it's odd for me to be at the church without any of you here, without having the opportunity to have other people involved in our worship service, but by God's grace that will change, and Lord willing it will change soon. We want to just encourage you again, not only in terms of to be persevering in these days of COVID, but in the days that we are not meeting in person. As far as we know, the other side of May 20th we'll make a decision when we can come back together as God's people here at Downsview. And until then, it's one of those things, excuse me, windy over there. It's one of those things that we can find almost a little frustrating. And, you know, we've said before that part of the reason that sometimes we find ourselves frustrated is because we have expectations of our lives that are not based on the promises of God. What I mean by that is we find ourselves kind of feeling a bit entitled to a certain kind of life and lifestyle here in Toronto and as members here at the church. And, you know, God has not promised us nor called us that the only way that we can worship in a way that's pleasing to Him is that we must all be in the same place at the same time in only this building and only on Sunday mornings at a certain time frame. The people of God throughout the world, well outside North America, know this far better than most of us, and certainly there are members amongst our congregation that can testify to that fact. In Feb Central, we are, as a collection of churches, often encouraging other churches, or they are actually asking us to become part of our association, our fellowship of churches, our I don't want to say the word denomination, but you probably know what I mean by saying that. Our collection, our fellowship of churches, our denomination, if you will, has a procedure that other churches can apply to and become direct and integral and full membership part of our FEB Central. We have very detailed procedures for that, and there's a number of churches that are in that process right now. And I was able to meet with one of them this week, actually, and the pastor is originally from the nation of Iraq and had to flee because of the Iraq and Iran war. And he eventually ended up here in Toronto and has been involved in the planting of a church, particularly to reach out to Arabic-speaking people, whether they're already Christians or people that they can share the gospel with. And, you know, you just hear just a little bit of my brother's story. And it was just so humbling to see the kind of persevering grace that God will give people to handle what He's called them to. But part of the reason and part of the means of grace that this brother was given was that he had a certain level of biblical expectation in terms of what he expected his life to be like when he became a Christian overseas amongst Arabic speaking and often amongst Muslim practicing Muslim-esque people. I say Muslim-esque because sometimes in North America we associate Arabic with Muslim, and of course that's not nearly the case. But of course when we say Muslim, we can often think of culture as opposed to just a set of religious beliefs and activities, and so we be careful about how we think about that. And so those who have come out of a background of the religion of Islam have an expectation that when they turn to Christ, boy, there's some very serious family, employment, even personal health-wise challenges that they know they're going to face. And I just want to encourage you and I, number one, to get a little perspective where we think it's a great trial or a great persecution of the church when it really is little more than inconvenience. And at the same time, to ask God to help us understand that part of His promises include the promises of difficulty. I'm going to touch on this a little more on Sunday morning in our sermon in the life of the Apostle Paul and as he commends Timothy and Epaphroditus to us. But part of that is that, you know, the Apostle Peter in his epistle reminded the people of God to not be surprised when fiery trials come upon them for their testing, as if something strange was happening to them. You know, part of the reason that I'm surprised by the difficulties that I endure is that I'm not expecting them. And the odd thing is that God says, don't be surprised, as if it's strange. And the fact is, it seems strange because I'm not expecting it. And because I'm not expecting it, I'm surprised at the strange thing that's happening. See, my Christian life is supposed to be as easy as non-Christians. My Christian life is to be as profitable and as wealthy and as healthy. And my life's supposed to be easier because I have the Lord. Well, in some ways it's easier when we have a future grace perspective that the promise that God gives us is that one day that we will indeed inherit the beautiful reality of ease and joy and eternal worship and fellowship with our King, that our salvation is laid up for us in heaven, reserved in heaven for us, Peter says, without spot or blemish or any such thing. And we know it's there, and God's promises that, and we have every reason to expect the culmination of that promise. However, we're not promised that on this side of heaven. In fact, what we're promised is, you know, to you it's been granted not only to believe, but also to suffer for Christ's sake. Philippians 1:29. When Peter writes that letter, he's saying, listen, don't be surprised when these fiery trials come upon you. They're fiery trials, not just inconveniences, they're fiery difficulties. And they come upon you for your testing, as if something strange was happening. Testing what? Testing whether what we believe and are living for is consistent with God's Word, with God Himself, with the revelation of God, what God has told us is going to happen. And I fail the test all the time. I miss my granddaughter because we have these restrictions. I miss my son. He's coming to continuous medical school involvement. And Pam and I, we can't go visit him like we thought we could. I miss my mom. She's been in Thunder Bay. We haven't seen each other for a year and a half. It's coming up on. She's come all the time. I miss my good buddy Steve, who's only in Barrie, but because of all of the COVID work that he's doing, I have to be so careful. I miss dear friends in Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay, and it's hard to travel and hard to see them. I missed the opportunity to take part in conducting even funerals in this past year because it just didn't work and it wasn't safe and I couldn't travel. And marriages and weddings. These are difficult times, brothers and sisters, but I have to be so careful that I don't continue to fail the test because I'm expecting. And I know I'm expecting because my frustration level betrays my expectation. And I'm surprised. And I'm angry. And I almost can feel as if God is not keeping His word when the fact is He is keeping His word. And so as we as God's people just seek to navigate another weekend of online ministry, please pray for one another that we would receive the promises of God as they are given to us. And then my expectation and yours would be not just tempered and influenced by it, but really governed by God and His Word. And that we recognize that when God causes and promises to cause all things, even these things, to work together for good, for those who love God and are called according to His purpose, that we recognize that that's exactly what He's doing in our lives, even when we're not able to meet in this wonderful church that I get to wander around and find myself with. It's good to be part of our church family, friends. Pam and I are very glad to be here. Looking forward to worshiping in spirit at the same time along with you. Sunday morning, 11 o'clock, the service will be ready to go online at downsviewbaptistchurch.com. Quote, see you there.